The NBA trade deadline has come and gone. We're joined by Eric Smith, and this is Instant Analysis brought to you by Tylenol Rapid Release Gel Caps. Rapid Release for rapid relief. Eric, the Toronto Raptors didn't do a whole lot at this NBA trade deadline. Jakob Poeltl is in, Khem Birch is out, along with a few picks, but that's it. Now we're just recording this just moments after the trade deadline has wrapped up. Your initial thoughts, or how about your instant analysis?
Well, I'll tell you, Kevin, I'm not overly surprised. And I've been saying this, and listen, I'm not here to pat myself on the back because I've been wrong many times in my life. Just ask my wife, or many Raptor fans out there like to remind me that I've been wrong on things. I really wasn't necessarily thinking the Raptors were going to be super active. I kind of had been feeling for a while that if there was a move to be made, it would be maybe one, but not two or three guys, and not this earth-shattering tear down rebuild. Multiple blockbusters. And then when the trade went official, I guess in the wee hours of this morning, if we want to technically still call it last night, the fact that the Raptors were adding players and they were looking at being buyers as opposed to sellers, I think that's kind of a signal to me what was to come the rest of the day. If you're adding a piece in Jakob Poeltl, I think you're looking at that saying, we like the core we have. And oh yeah, by the way, maybe there's a reason why so many teams want OG Anunoby, why so many teams apparently want Gary Trent and Fred VanVleet. So you kind of sit back and go, yeah, he's a solid point guard, and he's got, okay, free agency, you're going to have to figure that out and everything else, whatever else. Yeah, defensive player of the year. Yeah, solid shooter. Maybe we want to keep these guys. And you start seeing that this team might be starting to put things a little bit together. Yes, they're still below 500. Yes, they still have a long ways to go. But I think the core, as it stands, is underperforming the way we thought they would this year, probably overperformed last year better than many people anticipated. And somewhere the answer is in the middle. So you know what? Let's just continue to ride this thing out the rest of the year and then make our decisions, make our analysis, not so instant, in the offseason, and make the decisions going forward from there.
Yeah, we're going to look ahead to the offseason in just a second, but let's kind of focus on the here and now because the Raptors have their core at the moment. Jakob Poeltl, I'm going to assume he's going to slot into the starting lineup. It just makes sense that he'd be the starting center for the Toronto Raptors team now. So with the core intact, adding Poeltl, where does this team stand in the Eastern Conference?
To me, at the beginning of the season, Kevin, I'm going to rewind a little bit here. And you tell me, I'll throw it back to you for a second. As a sports fan, as a Raptor fan, as a basketball guy, did you not think that this Raptors team was probably kind of a middle of the pack type team? Like maybe somewhere similar to last year, maybe as high as 5, probably somewhere 5, 6, 7. They might be stuck in that play-in. They might be locked in. They weren't probably a top 3, top 14.
Yep, so that's right. That's right.
That's the way I felt, and I think a lot of people did. That's why when I talk about them underperforming, I think that we still feel like they could be that team. Now, you just added essentially a double-double guy. Now, were his numbers a little bit inflated, perhaps playing for a bad San Antonio team, and he was a marquee guy on that bad club? Perhaps, but he's still, to me, a very good player. And we could sit here and argue maybe the most available or certainly the most talked about starting center in this trade season. And the Raptors went out and got him. Now, what did it cost them? A guy that wasn't in their rotation in Khem Birch, a couple of second-round picks, and then, of course, the big one is the first-round pick. And from what we understand, it's top 5, top 6 protected. So that was a hefty price. But with due respect to Khem Birch, I don't think that's all that huge to give up for a starting center. So to your point, I agree. I think he slides into the starting lineup. And now you look and I'm knocking on my desk here, knock on wood, when healthy, OG Anunoby and Fred VanVleet with Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam, and Scotty Barnes as your starting unit, with then a bench unit of Gary Trent, Precious Achiuwa, and Chris Boucher. I think that's pretty good. And to me, that puts them back in the conversation of how high can they climb. And even if they can only climb as high as where they are right now, 10th, 9th, or even 8th or 7th, and they're still stuck in that play-in, to me, that team stacks up against any of those clubs that we're talking about in that sort of 5 through 10 range. And as I've said for years, just get me in. Listen, if you ask me right now if the Raptors were the 8th seed and in the playoffs and in the first round they have to face the Boston Celtics, yeah, that's a tough challenge. But I think that this team, with the playoff experience they have, with the talent they have, with now the balance to the roster they have, I think they're a better team today than they were even yesterday. And they've proven this year, Kevin, and let me finish this sentence because I know there's somebody waiting to jump on me. They've proven they can hang with the best of the best and even beat the best of the best. The flip side is they've also proven they can play down to the lowest of the low and be beaten by the lowest of the low. So can they now find consistency with this crew over the final 25, 30 games of the season and actually make a little bit of noise? That ultimately is the ultimate X factor. And I think with the talent they have, they can.
We look ahead to the offseason now, after whatever happens with the Toronto Raptors, wherever it may end for this team. They have 3 unrestricted free agents, key unrestricted free agents now in Jakob Poeltl, who comes over, Gary Trent Jr., and Fred VanVleet is also up for a new deal. What does the offseason look like for this Toronto Raptors team? Because it's probably going to cost over $70-ish million to sign those 3 players, and that would likely push the Raptors into the luxury tax. So like you said, is Masai Ujiri, is Bobby Webster, are those 2 doubling down on this core in that regard?
I think there's the other shoe to drop still. I think that's part of what this maybe signals, the fact that there wasn't movement at the deadline. I think the decisions now come in the summertime because you laid it out perfectly there. The amount of money that needs to be spent, the amount of people that need to be signed and retained. I simply don't think they'll be able to. I don't think they'll be able to. Even if the Raptors, even if ownership and whatnot were to come and say, yes, we'll cut XYZ, whatever the number of the check is, to pay a lump sum, a large sum of tax, I don't see them paying that much. So I just don't think it's going to be possible to be able to keep every single player that we're talking about right now being this core for the last 25, 30 games. I just don't see this same team being the same club on the floor when next season begins. And I think it's similar to what we went through a couple of years ago with Kyle Lowry. And again, I don't know if they're going to trade Fred VanVleet or if it's OG Anunoby or if it's Gary Trent or who it is, but I think it's going to come via sign and trade. Because I think you have a greater sense, Kevin, in the offseason then of what teams truly want and what teams truly need. And it's probably something that comes after the draft as well. So you know what you've got, you know what other teams have, you know what weaknesses they have, what weaknesses you still have, and how can we scratch each other's back and help each other out then. So I would anticipate, again, not everybody's going to be back by the time you and I do one of these things next September when training camp's starting. I think that it's just financially not feasible to think that it's going to be possible to keep all of these guys under contract long-term for this team.
E. Smith, we looked at yesterday, we looked at today, we looked at the future. What we know is that Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, Nick Nurse, they have this core group of players moving forward, at least for the foreseeable future. And we know that you will always be with us for the foreseeable future for some Raptors instant analysis. Appreciate it, pal.
Hopefully it's more than just the foreseeable future, man. Take care.
Thanks.